Well, what's going on, Knuckleheads? GKM Gaming here with another LEGO Legacy Heroes Unboxed video for you. And today I have a very special guest. The Fancy Life is in the house. Say hello, bro.
What's up, Knuckleheads? How you doing?
Love when you come on the channel and, we do some collabs. Definitely you were one of the first people I wanted to reach out to for a little collaboration series I'm working on right now. One of my favorite YouTubers in the community right now. If you haven't checked out his channel, I'll put his link in the description. He does a stream, I think, like 5 days a week?
4. We do Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah, he's got that early morning stream. So unfortunately, I don't get to tune in much because I started working again. So I'm working at 9 o'clock. But I do go back and watch them, and I'm able to tune in on the weekends.
Dude, it's totally all right. You've got a super important job molding the minds of our country's youth.
Yeah, unfortunately, 9 o'clock is right when I teach a class, and Matt streams at 9 o'clock. So maybe I catch like the last 10 minutes. But anyway, let's get into what we're talking about today. We want to go over the top 5 units in LEGO Legacy Heroes Unboxed with the tank tag. So Matt had brought up a good point. He's like, well, there are some units like Storm and Yeti. I feel like I could put them in the top 5 for tanks because they do fill a tanking role. But I think we're going to just go with the units with the tank tag today.
Sure. I think if we want to, we can do some sort of honorable mention for here's other characters that kind of sort of work, even though technically they don't have the tank tag.
Okay, yeah, let's do an honorable mention after our number 3 spot because we have a little bit of a discrepancy. Our number 1 and our number 2.
Aha, yes, go for it.
Let's get it started. So at number 5, I think we both agree Locust is the way we want to go here, correct?
Yeah, we both put Locust at number 5. He does bring a lot of utility to the table, but to be completely honest with you, his literal stats as a tank are actually lower than a lot of the other tanks in the game.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. Locust, one of the best supports in the game. I don't know why they gave him the tank tag. I just did a video maybe like a week ago of like my most wanted units for each faction. I wanted a Zetaxian Overlord who was like a tank that could heal and had the Technian alien tag.
Right.
I feel like Locust is support, and I feel like Space needs a tank that's gonna tank. They need something that's not Locust.
Right, and Locust, I use Locust in my arena team and my Brixpedition team, and I noticed that I always have to choose him to taunt when I'm ready to let him die. Because he can do that taunt, but as I mentioned before, his stats are just a little bit too low, and it's typical for him to die in just one full round of attacks.
Yeah, I was using him with Buccaneers for a while. He was like my 5th with it was like Bucks, Woo, and then Locust was my 5th for a bit because double disarm really was nice because you could kind of cripple other Woos when you're facing so many, mirror matches. One thing I really like that they did when they reworked him was his buff, his taunt clears other taunts.
Yes, very cool.
So you have to be pretty strategic with him. It kind of hurts the AI a little bit though. Because the AI is not very strategic. But I mean, he gives the attack up. He starts giving defense up now to space instead of speed up, which I think is fine. I don't think they really needed the speed up because their sets give them so much speed.
I completely agree with you. And I think that adding the way that they changed Locust's taunt is really, really great for that extra taunt removal on the enemy target. But here's something that you need to consider, or that everybody should consider when they are considering Locust and his AI. Locust is very fast. So what that means is on his first round, his AI is now going to have him taunting right away, but his taunt has a heal associated with it, which means that you actually lose the heal because Locust is so fast, he will taunt before he's taken any damage. So even though his taunt can actually heal him, you won't ever see that happen because he'll taunt before he's taken damage anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I like that the taunt gives a heal, especially in that Gorwell's Great Escape event where it's like the heals are very tough to come by.
Oh yeah, space is lacking on those for sure.
Yeah, and it's Quincy, he's not cutting it as a healer because he's not a healer and his heal is so many stipulations that really go into making it a good heal because it depends on the buffs on the opponent that you're hitting.
Very much so. Very dependent on what you have the opportunity to do to the enemy team before Quincy gets to his turn.
Yeah. So, I mean, I like Locust. I use Locust. I have him maxed out. Definitely, I think he's one of the better figures in the game. As far as tanks, with the tank tag, I got to put him at the number 5 spot because he's a great unit, but he's not really good at tanking.
I completely agree with you. He brings so much to the table that it's hard to discount his utility. But as a tank, he's a little squish.
Yeah, he's a very squishy tank, which just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, let's move on to the number 4 spot we got here. Now, we had a little bit of a disagreement here, but we got a couple castle tanks coming in here.
Correct.
And spoiler alert, neither one of them is Headley.
Right. Headley can be as happy as he wants to be, but he's going to be happy sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I actually just saw somebody did a video like Headley best tank, and I didn't watch it yet. I think it was Locust who did it, and I'm gonna watch it, but I wasn't sure where he was going with that. But obviously we have Basil and Burnibus, and me, I have Burnibus at 4, Basil at 3. I think you had Basil at 4, Burnibus at 3, right?
Yeah, I think relatively speaking, they're kind of interchangeable, but they definitely grab that 3 and 4 spot. But you had Burnibus at 4?
And Burnibus at 4. So Burnibus is great. He's got a lot of sustain. He's got a lot of counter, especially when you're running him with Magisto or King's Court. He's great with a King's Court team. But for me, Basil just brings so much to the game. And plus, Basil is part of the most broken combo in the game, the Basil-Willa combo.
Oh, yes.
I just have to put Basil ahead of Burnibus. Basil also does the job of Burnibus and Go-Go, but with one figure.
Very true. With one clear exception, and that is that Burnibus brings the buff clear to the table.
That's very true. And honestly, there's not a lot of buff clearers in the game. I mean, you have Locust, who we talked about, who can kill earlier, Taunt, which is really what you want a buff clear for the most part.
Right.
And then you have Wu, Scarlet, 5 figures in the game probably. And then, or at least top 10, and then Burnibus. And so I can see Burnibus at the number 3 spot. I know, I feel like Basil's just got it going on. He does so much. And I feel like the spooky tag is just better than the King's Court tag at this point.
I would agree with you definitely about the spooky tag overall being better than the King's Court tag. I think the only difficulty that you really get into is the difference in farmability of the two characters, right? So if somebody's watching this video going, well, should I go for Master Burnibus or Basil? Well, you don't really have much of a choice because Master Burnibus is farmable and Basil just isn't. So given that you do have them at, say, 7 stars and you have the availability of all of them, I think I would agree with you that Basil's a little higher than Master Burnibus, actually.
Well, but here's the thing is, though, Basil is usable at 5 stars.
Very true. Especially since
Basil,
Willa can just keep bringing him back to life.
You can justify using that 5-star Basil. Some people say that it's better to use a 5-star Basil. I'm not sure if I subscribe to that or not. I have to really try out my 5-star Basil. I'm waiting till I get him gear 7. That'll be a whole nother video because, I just keep gearing up people for videos.
Yes, right. Well, yeah, and I think the theory there is that Basil brings that his death heals the rest of the team. So I think the argument there is that if you leave Basil at 5 stars, he'll die more often, which allows him to heal the team more often, and then Willa's going to bring him back to life anyway. So I hear it, but I'm not sure if it's as effective as just having him be 7 stars. It'd just be harder to kill in the first place.
Yeah, I think it just depends on the team comp you're running because, honestly, I'm going to actually agree with you and put Basil at 4 and Burnibus at 3 because Basil is very dependent on you having Willa.
Very.
And I have 3-star Willa. I'm going to be running a team. 3-star Willa, 5-star Basil, and see how they do in Arena. Obviously with other units as well. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious to see how they do at that very low star, that free-to-play level. Whereas Burnibus is free-to-play at 7-star.
Correct.
And I do like Burnibus, and I think he's one of the best tanks in the game, and he always has been.
Now, I would say another thing to consider in the difference between Basil and Burnibus is that Basil is faster. So Basil's getting, his speed is 115, Master Burnibus's speed is 90, which means that if you're looking for a tank that can get a taunt off before the enemy has the opportunity to just demolish your team, Basil's going to be more reliable to that end because he can get that taunt off faster.
But Burnibus is going to taunt longer.
Correct. And yes, Burnibus is going to taunt longer because he is slower. And if you include his ability to just counterattack, I think a very easy argument could be made one way or another, which seems to be what we're doing anyway.
Yeah, no, and I actually, you convinced me. I think Basil 4, Burnibus 3. I think that's a good way to go. Now, before we get into the 1 and 2, let's talk about our honorable mentions. I'm going to drop a name that everybody hates, but I 7-starred him anyway and spent a lot of money on it because I'm dumb. Winston.
I don't think that that's stupid, to be completely honest with you. Anybody who's faced a 7-star Winston in Brickspedition, which is probably just about the only place you're gonna face a 7-star Winston, has had a hard time getting him down. His stats, when you get him up to 7 stars, are pretty extreme. 7 stars, gear level 7. His stats are pretty extreme. Not to mention the fact that for every stack of courage, he just has a straight up 7% damage reduction on him. So if he's got full courage, he's taking 35% less damage on an incredibly sized health pool and an incredible defense. I think that he's actually pretty solid. The difficulty is just getting him. And then putting him on a team to synergize with, right? Because you'd have to have all the Ghostbusters to really see him shine.
Even then, Ghostbusters are, they're great on offense. I have not had a team that I can't win it. I can beat them with pretty much anything when they're on defense. I farmed Winston, obviously, for the Fire Station team, the role model team. I think it'll come one day. And there'll be a time where I'll be the only person with a 7-star Winston.
There you
Probably
go.
not the only person. And it's going to work out for me. I'm like 4 gear pieces away from gear 7ing him. I'm going to do it. I'm still trying to make that Fire Station work somehow. I just think they need to give a little. I think Primo just needs a little bit more. If Primo was a little better, that team would be a lot better.
Yeah, I think that they might at some point introduce a new character that's like a fire captain or a fire chief to go along with it. And I think that it's at that point that they'll probably review the entire city team, the entire city gallery, as it were. But sticking to the point about tanks, I actually think that Winston is a really solid tank. He's just next to impossible to get. And then if you really want to see him shine, then you have to have the entire rest of the Ghostbusters team to go with him. So despite the fact that statistically he might be really, really good, you're just not going to be seeing him anywhere. You're not going to be getting him very much.
He's easy to work around. His taunt has a 4-turn cooldown. You have to kind of run him with another tank, another taunter. And when that other taunter turns out to be Primo, it just doesn't work out. But I do like Winston. He's definitely an honorable mention. Another honorable mention, Street Sweeper Sal. I'm going to be honest. You run him on an Ice Glider team, that team is awesome. I love Street Sweeper Sal. So I'm going to definitely say he's an honorable mention. He was very close to getting the top 5 for me as well.
Really? That close? I love Street Sweeper Sal as well. I think he's got some pretty good stats. His taunt lasts for the same number of turns as the cooldown of the taunt ability, which is really, really important to note because it means that if his taunt is not cleansed, then as soon as it runs out, you can use it again, which is, I think he's the only character that falls into that category.
I think the downside with like him and Winston is, aside from taunting and soaking up damage, you don't really do much else.
Correct. They bring no utility.
At least Street Sweeper Sal has a lot of sustain, so that's great, and that's why he was very close. But like Locust has a ton of utility. Burnibus has the buff clear, which is a great utility. Basil heals. Like the tanks you're going to really see in our top 5 have that utility. And I think my other honorable mentions, obviously Valiant, because Valiant has that utility. It's just if you have to run a pirate tank, I think you're better off with Scarlet than Valiant. Imperials just don't do it, and Valiant gets a lot of buffs from the Imperial set, but nobody's running the Imperials. And Demolition Dummy is another one who I think is great. He's got great synergies with city units. I wish he had the city tag, but he doesn't. But he's very, very underrated, Demolition Dummy as well. What do you think about Demolition Dummy and Valiant?
I think that Demolition Dummy does not make my honorable mention because in order to really see him shine, you have to use a team that is arguably pretty bad at this point. And now, pretty bad is a subjective term, obviously. If you are running that Arctic glider with Explorer Aurora, the rest of a city team and whatnot, you can get through all of the Brickspedition basically on auto mode without having to worry about anything. Even those board 7 ninjas, you can clear it all day long. But in the arena, you are fodder.
Yeah. Yeah, you can win an arena with glider. I've done it. But you're gonna get sniped.
Oh yeah.
And you're gonna fall. You're gonna fall fast.
There's no way you're staying there. Now, Valiant almost made my top 5 instead of Locust, if I'm being completely honest with you. But not by himself, and I think that's why ultimately he didn't make it. So you still see a lot of Valiant Scarlet combinations with Redbeard in the top 50 of my arena shard. And I think that that's important to note because of exactly what you said. Valiant has really, really great stats as a tank, but he's a little bit too slow. So if he's the only tank on your team, then by the time he gets to his turn, somebody on your team's already going to be dead. But yeah, you pair him with someone like Scarlet and he brings that group heal to the table. Plus Valiant, while he's taunting, is very hard to take down. He gets bonus defense while he's got that taunt up. Not to mention he's got incredibly high defense to begin with. So
he gives attack up on his heal also.
Exactly. So he makes your pirates deadlier and he's very hard to kill. The problem is he's very, very easy to get around. So he's great, but you have to have Scarlet on the team to make him great.
Yeah, he would be really great with the Imperial set on an Imperial team, but the problem is no one else would be really great. So he kind of just gets lost. That team doesn't really exist.
Correct. And I have a feeling at some point they'll revisit the Imperial team once they actually make the team like fully farmable, which they just aren't right now. So the Gameloft would have no interest in reviewing the Imperial team at the moment because you can't get them anyway.
Yeah, so it just doesn't make sense to me. But let's get to it. Obviously, the 1 and 2 spot, it's going to be between Lloyd and Scarlet for the 1 and 2. I think Scarlet is number 2, Lloyd is number 1, and I have gone on record saying Scarlet is one of my favorite units in the game, and I'm still going to say Scarlet number 2, Lloyd number 1. Matt thinks Lloyd number 2, Scarlet number 1. Matt, I'm going to let you make your point first, and then I'm going to retort it.
Got it. So Lloyd to me is very contingent upon being on a team with the rest of the ninjas for a number of reasons. First, let's go for the really, really solid things about Lloyd. He's got a decent sized health pool and he has a pretty good dodge chance, better than the rest of the tanks that we have listed. He has a little bit of a self-heal, which is the same as Scarlet. So we'll go ahead and sort of put those together. But more important than anything else, he is fast. He is, I believe, the fastest tank tag in the game, which means that he's going to get to go first. He's going to get to put the rest of his team into stealth. And if you're fighting against a team that has, say, Redbeard, then putting all of the characters into stealth means Redbeard's just not going to counter anybody, which completely negates the entire mechanic of a Buccaneer team. So I totally get it why people say that Lloyd is really, really solid. The problem that I have with Lloyd is that he's too RNG based, in my opinion, because part of his sustain is based on his ability to dodge, because his defense is among the lowest of all of the tanks in the game. At gear level 7, he has a defense of what, about 700, 600, 700?
6'10". I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah. So he has by far the lowest defense of any tank in the game, which means that if you get really, really great RNG, his defense doesn't matter because he's just going to be dodging everything. But if you get really bad RNG, Lloyd's going down in 1 round. Period. End of story. And
I disagree with you on that. I've seen Lloyd not dodge anything. He's still very hard to kill because usually you're running him with Woo. He has his own self heal. He's got Woo's heal. Nowadays, you're starting to see him run with Magisto. There's just so much healing, and he has a lot of health. He's annoying. He hangs around, Lloyd. He's kind of annoying to kill, and he does have that RNG thing going for him.
That's right. But that's what I was getting to before, is that Lloyd is more dependent on his tanking ability is more dependent on who you run him with. So for example, you put him with the rest of the ninjas, and then not only does he have the chance to dodge, but then you can also put Hardy up on all of your teammates, which is, I mean, Lloyd doesn't do that, but it's one of the benefits of running the full ninja team, is that all of a sudden you get a tank that goes very, very quickly. They can put everybody else into stealth. It is very, very dodgy. And then in addition to that, you can then put Hardy on him pretty reliably. But if you don't run him with a ninja team, then all you're bringing to the table is a tank that goes very fast. They can put everybody else into stealth, but then he sits there.
Here's the thing, though. With Scarlet, you kind of are basically handcuffed to running her with Redbeard because, I mean, why wouldn't you?
I completely agree with you.
And I feel like with Lloyd, you're kind of handcuffed to running him with Woo because why wouldn't you?
So then the real question is the Lloyd-Woo combination better than the Scarlet Pegleg combination?
Well, and here's why I'm going to say the Lloyd-Woo combination is because you see, if the best pirate teams are the pirate teams with the Scarlet Redbeard combination and the Lloyd Woo combination. Now, Lloyd and Woo, they're run on Magisto's Tower teams. They're run on Ninjago teams. They're run with spooky teams. They're run with Ghostbusters. Lloyd and Woo can pretty much go anywhere you need them to go, and they're going to get the job done. Whereas Scarlet and Redbeard, they dominated the game for a long time, but they have their lane and they stay in it. And I mean, Lloyd honestly is the counter to them anyway. And when you really look at it, it's like the best way to run Scarlet is with Lloyd.
Now, I completely agree. I actually agree with you if we would do like pairs, that Lloyd and Woo together is better than Scarlet Redbeard together, specifically because of what stealth does to the main mechanic of Scarlet and Redbeard combined, which basically means that Redbeard doesn't get to do all of his counterattacks and all the regular disarming ability. So what I'm kind of considering here is, well, what if you bring them anywhere else by themselves? So what if we run Lloyd without Woo? Or what if we run Scarlet without Redbeard?
I still think Lloyd without Woo has a ton of... It really depends on what you're going up against. I think stealth is going to help you out way more than taunting nowadays.
Possible. I guess it depends on what you're trying to protect then. Because I think that the ability for Scarlet to taunt when anyone gets below 50% health is going to be very, very helpful in some cases, but not in others. So for example, let's say you're fighting against a ninja team. Well, if one of your characters is at, say, 60% health, then pretty much anyone on the opposing ninja team is just going to one-shot you from 60% to 0. So Scarlet's not doing you any good in that particular case.
Yeah.
But if you're fighting against a team that does a little bit less damage per hit, where being at 60% health is not necessarily a death sentence, then you know that you are going to be getting that taunt from Scarlet. And I think that with the exception of the ninjas, there are very few full teams that bring that one-shot kill scenario to the table.
I'm going to give you my arena shard. In the top 25 are 4 Scarlets. In the top 20, there are 2 Scarlets. In the top 10, there is 1 Scarlet.
Right.
And there's a lot, I'm not going to count them all, there's a lot of Lloyd. Obviously, ninjas are a little more prevalent, so a lot of people are using ninja teams, but there's a lot of Lloyd being used. I think he's kind of like a staple of a free-to-play Magisto's Tower team if you really want to be super competitive with it. Now, he's a little more interchangeable out. I feel like I would interchange Lloyd out before Ghost, and there are advantages to having just Garmadon and Wu rather than all three, because sometimes you call Lloyd on the assist, and that's just not as good as calling Garmadon.
True.
But I don't know. For me, Lloyd's the number one. I think he's been in and out of the number one spot for like best tank or best figure in the game, really. And I think with how prevalent, like, you kind of need stealth nowadays.
I mean, you need stealth to avoid counterattacks. So if what we're talking about then really is the fact that the counterattack is the meta, then you're entirely correct. I'm not sure that I think counterattacking is the meta, just by comparison for what you said, and this actually throws a bone to your side of the ring here. If I look at the top 10 of my arena shard, 8 of them are running Lloyd and 0 of them are running Scarlet. However, then you also would have to move Basil the Batlord up in the ranking to like number 2, because then you also have 3 Basil the Batlords in the top 10 and 0 Scarlets as well. Then you also get into the issue that Magisto's Tower is 9 out of the top 10 teams in the top 10 of my arena shard. So it does get kind of hard.
Go ahead. We're talking farmability, and we're talking that the yin to his yang is Willow, which is the hardest farm in the game.
Correct.
Whereas the yin to Scarlet and Lloyd's yang is Wu and Redbeard, who are relatively easy farms at this point if you've been playing the game a while.
Yeah, that's very, very true. But along those lines, I'm looking at the rest of the teams that we have available to try to see, like, okay, well, based on sheer numbers, then what are we really looking at here? And number 1 on my arena shard is using Lloyd. They're also using Ghost. So that's not free to play farmable. Number 2 is using Lloyd and Willa. Number 3 is not using Lloyd at all, but is using Willa and Basil. So it gets into this weird, and I'm not going to sit here and list all of them, but they're all some semblance of that same thing. If you really want to compete in the top 10, top 20, there's going to be somebody that you are farming up that is not farmable, that you're waiting until that moment where you can just pour all of your resources into unlocking them. And number 12 in my arena shard is a full Buccaneers team.
I think Ghost is a free-to-play unit.
You think so?
Yeah, I mean, you had enough time, and space is the easiest farm in the game.
Very true. Very true.
And to unlock him wasn't hard. To get him 6-star was difficult. I haven't done it yet, which is why I'm farming Quincy now. But I'm the team I run. My main team is a free-to-play team, and it does involve Lloyd, Wu, 4-star Garmadon, Ghost, and Magisto. Those are definitely slow farms, hard farms. They're free farms.
Mm-hmm.
But Scarlet does bring a lot to the table. She's got a self-heal. She's got sustain. She's got the buff clear. I'd be hard-pressed to argue that she's not the best. But I have a hard time saying that Lloyd is not the best either. So
yeah, I agree with you completely. And here's what I would say the biggest difference is. In reality, if you are a brand new player to the game, then the biggest crunch you are going to see, and pretty much everybody agrees with this, is the money crunch. And the way that the only way to counteract that is still by getting your pirates. Now, you don't have to get Scarlet in order to do that. You can also get Valiant. You can run without a tank entirely. And the only reason why I know that is because I've done it. But you do need to get your pirates. And if you go into the shop where all of these things are available, unfortunately, all of these characters are available in the same place, the arena store. So if you want Scarlet or Lloyd, you're going to have to decide, because it's really a bad idea to split.
And if you want Lloyd, you're going to want Wu. And if you want Wu, you're going to need Scarlet. And you have to choose between Scarlet or Lloyd. I think I'm going to give you the win on this one too, Matt. You just got me.
So it is pretty hard to do, but for any new players out there, while we're talking about this, let me remind you, you can get Wu without Scarlet or Valiant. And I know because I did it and I made a video of it. Now, admittedly, it took me about 75 tries of the Wu event in order to get the right RNG together to be able to unlock Wu without a tank on my team. It can be done, but you might pull out all of your hair in the attempt.
Then you're wasting gold farming Private LaCoy.
Yes, that is the trade-off there too. So it's, if you get Scarlet early, you will have more uses for her much longer. As you just mentioned, I am probably the only person who has Private LaCoy up to the level that I have him leveled up to. Where is he now? I have him up at 7 stars, full gear level 6, level 57. That's millions upon millions of coinage that got spent leveling up a character that I will never ever use.
That's horrible to think about.
Yeah, it's not great. So I actually think that if what you're focusing on is the arena meta, that Lloyd is definitely the way to go. But if you want to maximize your ability to grab resources from the rest of the game, that Scarlet is the way to go. So it really kind of depends on your playstyle and what you're looking to do.
Yeah, and I kind of like, to your point, if you want to be viable in arena, you're going to need those resources. So yeah, we're going to go with Lloyd number 2 and Scarlet number 1.
Oh my goodness, I can't believe it.
That wins again.
Again? Oh, I don't win that often.
You won twice in this video, but you know what? That's fine by me because I like the conversation to kind of get to that point.
Now, I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about the characters that can do some taunting that are not technically listed as tanks.
Yes, the supports that taunt.
Right.
The attackers that taunt.
Right.
So obviously, we got your boy, Yeti.
The Yeti. I can talk all day and all night about the Yeti. I love the Yeti. But I have found, despite the fact that the Yeti's stats are really, really solid, he is pretty team dependent. And I think that's kind of the carry through for this entire video, is all of these tanks are somewhat team dependent.
Yeah, who's really independent? I guess, honestly, the number 5 spot, Locust, is probably the most plug and play.
That you're probably right, because he's fast without relying on buffing from anybody else.
Yeah.
He's got 2 AoE abilities plus an ultimate ability that has a chance to disarm without relying on anybody else. He has a taunt that clears taunt without relying on synergy from anybody else. So I would agree with you. I think he's probably the most plug and play.
He's just really bad at tanking, but he's really a great plug and play unit.
Yeah, he's just not great as a tank. It's pretty funny.
We were talking about on your stream today, Storm, Princess Storm. I'm going to, when I do my free-to-play castle video, coming soon, as soon as I get my Verta to Gear 7, Princess Storm, the point of her is to taunt, to build courage, and then as she's taunting, she's getting hit, you heal her with Magisto, she gets payback, which when she does a payback, it gives her even more courage. She gets those stacks up really, really quickly when she's taunting.
Yes.
And then if you're running her with Ghosts too, the second she goes below half health, she's done taunting, so that long taunt that she has isn't as much of a downside when you're running Ghost. Ghost really gave Castle a big boost. Mm-hmm. And he's another one who he has a lot of sustain, but he's squishy and easy to kill. But he does AoE. He's like a Scarlet for stealth. He's another one that you got to honorable mention. He does do a little bit of tanking and protecting of the team.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're exactly right.
Officer,
he is the Scarlet Lloyd love child.
Officer Primo is another one too. Now his taunt, first off, they need to rework it because it gives speed up, which is great. But if you're playing him on a city team, you're already getting speed up from Chef. What I love about his taunt is it strips taunt away from any of your other taunters.
Correct.
It's kind of used as a save. The problem is the AI starts turn 1 and they're like, I'm going to taunt with this, which makes no sense to me. So his AI is terrible.
Well, and more to the point, Primo brings a lot of support utility to the game. I think that his support tag is very well earned. The problem with his taunt is Primo is one of the easiest characters to take out. He has no defense, and his health pool is terrible, and you can only get him up to 5 stars, so you can't even get him much higher than he already is.
I have him as high as you can get him, and his stats are not great. You know, his HP is 14,000. His attack is 2,300. His defense is like 460.
Yeah.
The thing is, his taunt is not bad when you really want to save your tank. If your Scarlet's about to go down, or
right, and he's fast enough that you can
drop.
usually rely on his ability to get it off in time.
I think what would fix him is a speed increase so that he can get his ultimate off sooner. I think a speed increase would be really useful for him. Obviously, a star increase and a little change with his taunt.
I think
maybe his attack up thing do an AOE, have like a little AOE clip.
I think that that's a pretty good idea, and I think that actually they can lean into the police officer thing, right? Because he's the crossing guard police officer. He's got the giant stop sign. His whole thing is let's see, the serve and protect, what are they called? Calling small cars. I mean, he is the police officer. I wonder if they could change his passive ability so that it has something to do with speeding, and like how the police officers will pull you over for speeding. So speeding in this game might be represented by a character gaining pep outside of their normal turn order of gaining pep. So like anytime a character gains extra pep, Primo also gains extra pep. So like anytime Garmadon grabs extra pep, so does Primo, like that kind of thing. So that the police officer can sort of catch you for speeding, as it were.
Yeah, I just wish that his basic was a little more than 50% on the speed down. If it was 100%, it would be a lot more useful too.
Oh yeah, I mean we can do a whole video on how I wish the mechanics of the 40, 50, 60% chance to do a thing were just completely removed, and the ability either happened or it didn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people think when they eventually they're going to start going above level 5 for abilities, they will eventually cap out at 100% for those things. That's why they're not 100% now.
That's a good point, and actually we know that there's at least the idea of doing that because the tier 4 ability elixirs are available to purchase in the event store.
Okay, that's pretty much all we got for you today, Knuckleheads. Big thanks to the Fancy Life for coming on the channel and doing this video. Definitely going to be one of the longer ones, but I think you guys will really enjoy it. Check out his channel in the comments. Please remember to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, ding that little bell for some notifications, and as always, remember to knuckle up.